you nightmare nerds, and welcome to a very special episode of the Nightmare Network podcast. Today is our inaugural episode of RIP Reboots for one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Dexter. With an original run from 2006 to 2013, Dexter has a strong, loyal fan base that has a universal distaste for the finale. Last year, original showrunner Clyde Phillips returned to give Dexter the ending he deserves in the rebooted series Dexter New Blood. Can he live up to the promise? Find out today on this episode of RIP Reboots. So, all right, all you nightmare nerds, welcome to our very first episode of RIP Reboots. This is an episode where we take some intellectual properties, whether it's movies or television series, books, maybe down the road, that would be cool. And we talk about the different iterations of them that have come out over the years. For instance, today we will be talking about one of my all-time favorite TV shows, Dexter. And as we all know, it's recently been rebooted as Dexter New Blood. And with us today, we have one of my best friends, recently married. So everybody give it up for him, Mr. Christopher Capitanio. Everybody give it up. Claps, 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 claps. Chris, thank you so much for being part of this today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully I have some decent insight. But at the very least, I know I'm always a good sounding board for you. So I know we'll have some fun.
At the very least, we could always just show each other memes and I could describe them in detail to the listening audience, which would be a good time. All right. So
with that.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get started here. So I'm going to ask you a question and then I'll give my answer to it afterwards. Do you remember the first time you ever experienced Dexter, and how did that initial episode, that pilot, make you feel? Because I can only assume it was with me, so it must have made you feel excellent. But anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And it's funny. That's one of the few shows that I remember that visceral kind of experience. We watched it in your parents', I guess, family room or whatever.
Yep.
And I remember just when the first episode was over, I had this feeling of, I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've had that feeling since then, but it was a really palpable excitement, something that I wait to keep going. And I think we watched the first episode, and then I probably had to go home immediately because at this point we were probably
Yeah, we were in high school at this point for sure.
Yeah. So this was 2007, 2008, something like that. And granted, I'd led a relatively sheltered life,
sure,
and hadn't dipped my toes into that kind of water too far. But I remember it was just something that was so fresh and exciting to me to watch. It was a character that I'd never really experienced. Obviously, the anti-hero thing,
sure,
quote unquote, is he an anti-hero? Even I'm sure we'll dig into that kind of stuff later. But yeah, something where we're in such a completely different point of view with our protagonist from anything I could possibly in my own reality.
It's funny that you bring that up, because especially recently with the conclusion of Dexter New Blood, I have been constantly thinking how it's a show that kind of challenges its audience, because I think in some extent we want to root for Dexter and we want to be sympathetic towards this character, but at the same time he is a murderer who is killing people, most of the time innocent people. So it's funny when we get into like the new finale when everybody's like, that's so out of character for Dexter to kill this person. I'm like, is it? We're not supposed to be feeling this way about him in that way, right? Because he's a murderer, which I think is kind of funny. It
reminds me a lot of like the Rick and Morty thing, when people be like, oh, I relate so much to Rick. It's like, no, that's not at all the point.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, you're not. Like, we're not supposed to be relating to Dexter, really. Like in terms of actions, because when I first saw the show, I jumped in. I don't know if you know this, even like later than I didn't watch the first few seasons live. The first 3 seasons had gone on, and 3.5, and it was halfway through season 4, so this was like prime time Dexter, because the 4th season is obviously the best season. So this was prime time Dexter, and my siblings had started to watch it, and they were older than me at the time, so they had easier access to all of this violent TV shows. And so I wanted to watch it. And I remember going back and watching that first episode, and it's exactly like you said. Like I don't remember ever experiencing a show like this that's so transparent with essentially a sociopath killer, right? That it's doing everything that it can to make us sympathize with this evil anti-hero. And that's kind of the point. It's supposed to challenge your audience to, to say, like, why am I sympathizing with this? Because I think there's a part of Dexter, and it's the part that we sympathize with the easiest, which is that I'm afraid to feel nothing, right? And it's especially for me, it came, kind of going into my my late teens into my 20s, where I was having this kind of existential dread of, like, this quarter life crisis, where it's like sometimes I feel like I'm not supposed to feel the way that everyone else feels, right? And so I think that's our entry point to Dexter, is this complicated set of emotions that we have that we don't discuss, and then the filmmakers or the TV series creators kind of take it a step forward and being like, well, this is kind of where these feelings go when left untended to, right? Which I think is kind of horrifying in itself. I don't know if you feel kind of a similar way, but that's immediately how I kind of connected to Dexter, was this complicated, like these like kind of a fear that you're going to feel the same way that he does. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
I think that is definitely one thing there. I'm surprised at just how many aspects of the human condition I feel like are reflected when you're watching this show. One of the things that I'm sure we'll talk about more and more is this idea of the big theme of the show is relationships.
Yeah.
And how Dexter is always alone no matter what. And that's something that I think everybody kind of deals with, where you've, messed up relationships through one way or another. Hopefully not through murder,
sure,
but one way or another.
Yeah.
And, you're dealing with all of that kind of fallout. So it's interesting seeing it portrayed on the screen in such a way that is dialed up way past 11.
Right.
And all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. And I think another thing too that is part of the immediate appeal is, kind of this very human thing. I notice it with my wife and lots of friends, this obsession with the macabre, and
sure,
this, with true crime being such a huge thing.
Yeah.
And just this kind of, I don't want to say borderline obsession with serial killers and stuff, but there's a fascination there that is
sure,
pretty inescapable. And it's something where this is almost like you're along for the ride,
right?
In a way, and that's something that you don't typically get with serial killers and such in reality. So it kind of taps into the dark passenger that we all have,
right?
And that endless fascination with the macabre and death and all that kind of stuff, but presented in a lighthearted and much more easily consumed kind of way.
Sure, and kind of going along that point, we had kind of said earlier when we first saw it, it was something we had never really seen before, and a few years after this, we did the research. It debuted about 2 and 3 years after this, was Breaking Bad, and everybody kind of really glorifies Breaking Bad to, like, the best TV show of all time. And as I was watching Breaking Bad, I was thinking a lot of stuff going on in Breaking Bad was going on in Dexter before it even kind of came to mainstream television. Granted, Dexter had the premium cable kind of thing, so it was on Showtime. It had a little bit more freedom, and Breaking Bad came out on AMC. But there were lots of themes of, like, the struggles of, like, family life and relationships hidden behind this facade of crime, as well as the main character struggle to be able to connect to members of his own individual family, and that feeling of, like, you're on for the ride with this, right? Like it's similar perspectives taken to different lengths, where we have us on the ride with Dexter as a serial killer, and it's almost like they took Walter White and they're like, how can we go along for the ride with this drug dealer that doesn't fit that mold? And so, Breaking Bad's great. I know you've never seen it, and we've kind of talked about this, but for me, it Breaking Bad owes a lot to the original Dexters, and I'm a Dexter defender all day, even though we're going to talk about how terrible those last 4 seasons are. But those first 4 seasons, I think, really paved a really great foundation to the modern day anti-hero kind of narratives that we've seen for the last 20 years, which I think is really impressive.
Yeah, I feel like the anti-hero thing is something that comes and goes.
Sure.
Not in the sense of it being a fad, but it's a cyclical kind of thing where there are specific eras in time where the anti-hero has become the popular thing, even back to like, film noir and all that kind of stuff, and the gangster films and,
Right.
and things like that. And then, of course, stuff like the advent of slasher films, when those were such a big deal, and you had all those at around the same time.
Right.
So I think it is interesting that 2 shows of the same, in a way, I guess you could say, cut from the same cloth,
Sure.
definitely made such waves and were so popular at a similar time, and again hailed as some of the great television of all time. Although, I think Dexter has a little bit more controversy to it than Breaking Bad does.
Yeah, I mean, those last 4 seasons are truly terrible, and we're going to jump into that right away. So the first thing I want to talk about is, let's talk about those first 4 seasons and what made it great before kind of pivoting and going to what really a lot of people consider, myself included, to be the downfall of the show. So seasons 1 through 4 of Dexter were written by head writer was Clyde Phillips. It was a different head writer from the second half of the show, and you can very much tell that. And we kind of talked about this earlier, where I felt like every season had a one-word theme to it, where like season 1 was like brotherhood, and then season 2 was like was relationships, and season 3 was friendship, and season 4 was family, and so I always thought it was really cool to be able to like pinpoint it down to one thing, and you can see like a concise direction from the writers. But those first 4 seasons really hit different than the latter 4. To you, what do you think? I know it's been a while since you've watched all of them. I'm fresh off of a rewatch. What in your memory, what made those first 4 seasons really something special?
It's tough to say. I just rewatched or watched a little recap. But I guess with, the first 4 seasons in particular, I feel like the character himself really had an arc.
Yeah.
And that we're presented to him in kind of his barest, like the most, when we first see Dexter, that is when he is at his most.
Yes.
Dexter. Where he's full blown serial killer, having a great time. There's like no consequences, no remorse, no feelings, no any of that. And then life starts to happen. Like life starts to happen for all of us. It's kind of funny thing that I was looking back on. Like it's kind of like how we all have our hobbies, and our thing that really drives us, and then one thing after another, life starts to get in there, whether it's a job, from this. And these are just all things that are taking him and preventing him from being a serial killer.
Right.
So, in the first season, you have this idea, of what he's always been yearning for is somebody that he can connect with.
Sure.
Again, a very, very relatable kind of concept. And we eventually get, and I guess we should mention before we go any further, there will be spoilers abound.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, the Nightmare Nerds know there are spoilers in this one. And I should say before you go on, I feel like though you're correct, as the series goes on, especially in those first 4, we kind of get the feeling that Dexter wants to connect, and that's something that he deeply desires. But I don't think he knows that when the series starts. And as the series progresses, I think that it's only then that he kind of realizes he wants something to connect to. And me, as a super nerd of like writer and writing structure, a question I always tend to ask myself is, why did the story start here? And for Dexter, it always feels to me that it starts on season 1 because this is the initiation of great change for that character, right? He's in this kind of loop where he's, kill, go to work, get donuts. And you experience that with him. That first episode, you are really in that loop with him. Date night, all a facade to him. And then it's only when the ice truck killer comes, right, Dexter's brother, Brian Moser, that he's probably for the first time in his life confronted with actual emotion and actual, I would say, remembrances of trauma. And we have these really beautiful scenes of, him passing out in that room filled with blood, the hotel room filled with blood that the ice truck killer paints with blood of all the victims that he's been saving. And, Dexter literally collapsing and having, flashbacks to, his child self when his mother was killed in these things and in the storage container. And so to me, the first 4 seasons are really great. And specifically that first season is really something special because we experience this kind of awakening with Dexter, and you can tell it's something new to him. He doesn't normally experience these difficult emotions until we start to take that journey with him.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's, with each subsequent season, that journey just twists off into different directions. And like I said, like kind of what you were saying, I feel like the first 4 seasons in particular are the ones where that arc is the most tangible.
Yes.
And where, when you get into after that, it almost gets into like a serial kind of thing where it's, Dexter is not changed. It's kind of just, okay, who's going to kill this week?
Yes.
It'll still be entertaining.
which is ironic because he kills significantly less people as the show goes on. It's like, it becomes more like, I hope he's going to kill someone this week in the last 4 seasons. But those first 4 are so tight and the writing is so succinct that they rarely throw scenes away. And the narrators are very tightly knit. And even out of those first 4, I would say probably season 3 is probably the weakest of those. But even that is extremely tightly woven. It takes this friendship arc with Miguel Prado, him becoming Dexter's best man, and is like weaving this into, that's the year he decides to get married and things like that. And it's these really challenging relationships that fit into the narrative so well that I think really make those first 4 seasons as strong as they do. Especially one thing I really enjoyed the second time around. It's just probably like the 4th time around at this point, but recently rewatching it, the ending of season 2 with Dokes is really, really, really good. Like, how he becomes kind of trapped and their relationship comes about and how he in turn kind of frames Dokes for all of this stuff. And the narrative tools they use in that end of the season is really, really intricate and fits so well. And that kind of narrative is just missing from the last 4 seasons. It becomes a serial. It becomes more of it always kind of had a soap opera type of a feel, but it really becomes more individual narrative than overarching narrative. Specifically season 6 to 8. In 5, we had the Lumen murders, and that kind of felt cohesive, but it really just kind of becomes more individual narratives the further out we get in the show.
Yeah, I feel like that Dokes season in particular, it had this propulsion to it with that character.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, my damn app here keeps popping up on me. But there's a word that I'm trying to think of that is escaping me and it's killing me. It's something I'm a big pro wrestling fan, so it's a pro wrestling thing where certain matches have this, where it's that intensity where each thing steps up to another level.
Right.
And oh man, it's killing me that I can't think of this word. But what's the word?
Came for the Dexter, stayed for the wrestling. Welcome to Nightmare Network season 2.
But yeah, it's something that the Dokes character added that I think was missing through a lot of other things.
It gave him a consistent nemesis, and I think it also gave the show its heart, which really wasn't revisited in the last 4 seasons, aside from the very end of season 7, which I think of the 4, the last probably 4 or 5 episodes of season 7, where LaGuerta's finally on the Dexter hunt. It's really the only time that for those 4 seasons really get good. And I think that is is Dexter going to get caught? Right? That's really what pushes it.
I figured out the word.
What is it?
It's a sense of urgency.
Oh, there you go.
Where with pro wrestling, they always use that, like, you're trying to win,
sure.
And
yeah.
Sometimes, you'll have somebody where it's all just cavalier, and it's like, no, it's not a fight.
Yeah.
So with Dokes in particular, he just adds this sense of urgency to the character, where it's just and that uncomfortableness where you feel Dex, where it's always like, just let him do it. Just let him.
Yeah. Again, we revert to this thing where I talked about earlier. We shouldn't be rooting for this man to do it, right? That's kind of not right. And I think in a certain level we do, because it's like, oh well, he's taking care of the trash, right? Except you realize, where we're going to talk about this later, what's rule number 1 of the code? Don't get caught. And Dexter will do anything to fit rule number 1, right? Don't get caught. And I think that's where that is where the heart of the show kind of comes in. We started with season 1, and it was really about establishing this character. And then at least for the next few seasons, it becomes don't get caught. It turns into we're afraid that Rita's going to find out, or we're afraid that Deb's going to find out, or we're afraid that, that whole season 2 is something special as well, because that's when Lundy gets there, and the whole season's a hunt for Dexter, right? And that's what makes that such an edgier seat. And then also Lila's there too, and she is the absolute worst. Hate Lila. Actually, in fact, this is a real bullet point I have on my podcast notes right here. There is only one thing in the show that's worse than Lila, and that is Deb as a police officer. Deb is the worst police officer in the world. She's like, oh man, I can't believe we can't lock this thing down and lock this these charges down. And then 7 other people are like, well, maybe you shouldn't have slept with the main witness. You are the detective on this. Please stop doing that. This is the 900th time. Yeah. Deb, you are a terrible police officer. I'm sorry. And I think it's season 3. Her entire arc is, I'm going to get my detective's badge. And that whole season, all that happens is she dates the main witness. He gets skinned alive by the skinner. She's ruining every investigation. And at the end, LaGuerta's like, you really earned this. And I'm like, has she earned this? Has she earned this? Or has she ruined 5 different cases in the last 3 episodes? It's insane. Deb sucks.
Deb's so great. But that's one thing I remember throughout when we were watching it. It was kind of pointing that out, anytime she did anything like that. And that was part of the fun,
Right.
It's one thing that I did like about the show, just in general, is there's a charm in how fun it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Deb is, especially in those earlier seasons, she's a bit more of that, between her foul mouth and just the way that she lives her life. It's later when,
even she becomes less fun in the last 4 seasons.
Exactly. But yeah, she is like almost as bad as when we would joke about Karen Page in season 2 Daredevil, where it's like, Karen, you're a secretary. Stop it.
You're not even doing your job, Karen. You have
is doing a job or trying to do her best.
Right.
Certainly, the E for effort.
Right.
But
so while we're talking about the first 4 seasons, we can't. A certain amount of time needs to be set aside for season 4, because to this day, season 4, to myself, is the best individual season of television I've ever seen. It is fantastic. The arcs for every character are amazing. The reveal, obviously, the main death at the end of the season broke me for sure. So let's jump into you. I know it's been a while since you've seen it, but I think that's going to kind of help the conversation. When we find out about Rita, where were you? I remember exactly where I was. How did you feel? Are you okay now? Do you need a hug?
I was in the same room as watching the first episode.
Right.
I remember watching that with you, and you were prepared. I
was there. I knew
already. And I feel like you had tried to prepare me in ways, but you still can't.
No, it's
And yeah, that was one of the most devastating losses in fiction that I can think of.
yeah.
Because Rita was just such a great, lovely character throughout, and so her whole life was tragic.
And her arc is so beautiful too. Rita starts out as this survivor of domestic abuse, and the first time we meet her in that first season, she's so timid. She's afraid of her own shadow. She's struggling at work because she's in the hospitality industry working at this hotel, and she can't. She's taken all of the shit from all of her different clients and stuff, and each season she really builds all of that strength back, and not to any credit to Dexter too. She's such a strong female character where she's confronting Paul. She sets boundaries with him and their children before Dexter kills him, or sends him to jail at least, and he gets shivved by some other people. She becomes a great mom. She sets boundaries with Dexter as well when they become pregnant, and I think that's the first time Dexter's like, I'm not in the driver's seat, and this is making me panic. And especially that last season, she comes into her own. She's fought back and built her own life, and has a family and this beautiful home with these beautiful kids, and and what she perceives to be this beautiful husband, and then we come back to the sins of Dexter that put her in that tub with Trinity, and it's so heartbreaking for us to experience, because we're right there with Rita too. How we said we were right there with Dexter, is he's along for the ride with these murders. We're along for the ride with Rita too, building up this life, and to finally have a culmination of that and to have it stripped away. I remember thinking at the time, where do we even go from here? Right? It was one of those fiction deaths where it so disrupts everything you perceive about this narrative that it blindsides you completely. And I remember reading a review at the time, and one of the writers was like, it's frankly astounding that you can watch syndicated television like this and still be surprised, because nobody saw this coming. And the structure of the show was fantastic too. He puts her in the cab, he sends her away to safety, and they bring her back into this through the story, and that's what's really important about that season. It's just so I'm still not okay. I don't know if you can tell, I'm still kind of recovering from Rita's death.
Yeah, it's funny because you get the opposite with Rita that you get from Dexter.
Yes.
Kind of, as we talk about, Dexter starts out as his most, I guess, strong or complete version of himself in a way.
Yes.
And Rita, we're introduced to at kind of her most broken.
Yeah.
So she's the character that we were really rooting for.
Yes.
The whole first 4 seasons. We want, because we know that she deserves better.
Yes.
Which is what makes that final scene all the more terrifying. What makes that sinking feeling in your gut.
Yep.
But yeah, I remember when I watched it, it was the kind of thing I needed a while before I could get back to it.
Yeah.
And that's only happened to me with a few things, though, for very different reasons. Like, that happened to me when I read American Psycho, for example, with the last few murders in there, because it was just so brutally, just the way that Bret Easton Ellis wrote all of that out. It's just so, stomach churning and stuff. And I needed a little break from that. But with Rita, it was more, just such an emotional. And it's something, part of what we love these shows is because we relate to these characters, and in ways they start to become our family because of all this time that we spend with them and invest in them. So you have something so horrible and brutal happen to a character that you care about so deeply, who is, the purest.
Right. Really an angel, literally.
Yeah, it hurts so bad, but props to John Lithgow for creating, I think, easily the best antagonist.
Oh, absolutely.
Throughout, in terms of somebody who it almost seems to Dexter who has it all.
Yeah.
Who has what he'd been trying to figure out. He has it figured out already.
Yeah, and it's like we look at the Trinity Killer, right? And we see what Dexter sees. Like we see what we want Dexter to be in the future. At least that's immediately what we see, right? We see we're it's really interesting. We're introduced to Trinity, and all we know about him is that he's this vicious serial killer, right? And we don't learn that he has a family till maybe like 5-6 episodes into the season, which completely turns ahead on our perceptions of this character. And so we're seeing mirrors of Dexter and his family with Trinity and his family. And us, like Dexter, we, because we want him to succeed in his murders. We're like, see, Dexter, you can have it all, just like Trinity can, right? And he's got the family, he's got the murder, he can do it totally. Kill him first, though, but you can totally do this. But the more you learn about Trinity and the more you learn about his family, the more you realize that they are trapped inside the house with a serial killer. And it's even more of an example of this writing room defying us to root for Dexter, right? And we still do it, which is why I feel like there are certain people who believe that the show should have ended with season 4. I'm probably one of those people, even though I'll take any Dexter that I can get. But it ends with this exclamation point of like, this is why that, like, you did this, right? This is your fault because of these things. This is why you can't have a future like this. And that season, especially with John Lithgow, who is the dad from Footloose, by the way, which means what happened was John Lithgow at the end of Footloose could not handle Kevin Bacon's new regime of a dancing town, left his family and moved to Miami, created the helping hands thing that he does, and becomes a serial killer. You heard it here first on Nightmare Network. Dexter is a sequel to Footloose. Mind blown.
That's ones. We do that all the time.
Yeah, we do. It's a lot of fun.
Films and media together. That's a really good one, man.
That was a good one. Yeah, I remember.
You should be.
Yeah, I'm quite proud of that. But going back, but in all reality, it was the perfect exclamation point to it, and that's just kind of how I feel. And the last 4 seasons feel like a little bit of a taint on that, but I don't know how you feel. So that conclusion, what would you say? Do you think that's the proper Dexter ending point, and that they pushed it too far, or do you think they just went in the wrong direction?
It's tough to say, because there's obviously there has to be some sort of response to that. Ending on that note is just so hardcore that we need to see the fallout. So I think that most shows probably have a kind of a shelf life of about that long, and kind of thing. I think if they had wrapped up another season after that, maybe that would have felt right.
Yeah.
But it was definitely the kind of thing that following up a moment like that is so difficult to do.
Right.
Especially when you're doing a show where you're trying to just, keep propelling forward and make money and stuff, and that makes sense. So it definitely, that was the turning point in terms of it having so much to live up to that it could quite attain that same status. And then, I feel like there are moments throughout that it's, I don't want to say disrespectful to that, but it's stuff that when you watch it is somebody that had been along that ride, and you have all this connection to a character like Rita, and then you have Newman and Dexter shacking up. It's again a gut punch.
Yeah, and he's got, like, we were watching recently, he's got like one episode where he's bummed about Rita, and I think that's what makes it kind of worse for me. That whole season should have been about the fallout from Rita, season 5. And so I guess we'll take this point, like, let's move into the last 4 seasons and talk about why we feel such animosity towards it, and why we have such kind of a sour taste in our mouth. And I think it starts with that. I don't remember feeling this before, but especially now, like watching them so consecutively back and forth, really looking at them. he has like 2 episodes where he's bummed about Rita, and that entire episode season should have been fallout for it. They kind of merge Lumen and Rita's story, like he's trying to get, justice for Lumen or for Rita through Lumen, and it's just not enough because what I really wanted to see from that follow-up season is a Dexter in a downward spiral. But what I feel from most of those seasons is a lack of urgency overall. It becomes more serial, and there are very few times that I was ever concerned about Dexter getting caught or something like that. It became very mundane to me. And so especially that first season, I think immediately it got off with a bad taste, even though I do actually kind of like that season. I think the kills are pretty good that year, but I wanted a downward spiral from his actions as repercussions for he needed a punishment for that. And I don't think he got it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I think that's the season that I feel like I remember the least from watching the the recap and everything. I was
the Lumen seasons.
Yeah, I remembered her, but I couldn't remember who the big antagonists were. For example, was it Jordan Chase?
Jordan Chase, Boyd with his roadkill.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the hotel kill was really cool. There's the shot of him like taking out the head in like a little carry-on bag that he puts on the wheelie cart for the luggage. So there's some good imagery in that series. I don't dislike that season on the whole, but like I said, I just felt it becomes much less urgent after that. And in fact, see what happened was Lumen, played by Julia Stiles, no one would save the last dance for her. So similarly to John Lithgow, she escaped to Miami and was then apprehended by Boyd. You guys are learning so much on today's podcast.
The Dexter cinematic universe than anyone could have ever thought.
It's like Avengers, Infinity War, Endgame, really, Footloose, Save the Last Dance, Dexter, all in one umbrella.
Wait to see what other ones we connect over the course of
this is going to be great. But man, those seasons really do suck. I getting through them was a chore. In season 6 is when we have Tom Hanks's kid become a serial killer. And that season is probably I think that's my most forgettable. I've watched it recently and I really don't remember what happened, except that Edward James Olmos was in it as well.
I remember like surprisingly having a lot of fun with that season, more so because for once it didn't feel so serious, or in some ways it was kind of a return to form in that it was like, I wasn't worried for Dexter throughout.
Sure. Yeah.
I was just like happy to watch things play along. And sometimes,
I get that.
And it was, never once believable. Like, yeah, Tom Hanks' kid's gonna get the best of Dexter.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
But it was entertaining to me watching that season, and there are a couple throughout, but definitely not. Again, in terms of ramping up the urgency and stuff.
Yeah,
definitely he took several steps back in that department and kind of lost focus of what I feel was the main overarching Dexter story. It's kind of like Dexter takes a little vacation where he also, still has to deal with a serial killer, and get on and stuff, but definitely not lacking compared to the previous one in terms of really developing his character.
I also remember thinking as I was watching it that it was the first time I remember watching Dexter and feeling like it was being derivative of something else, because this season felt very much like a ripoff Saw movie to me, because they have all these weird traps and crap for all like he's like, oh look, it's the angel. I remember the angel with the girl gets ripped open, and like there was one that he let there like blood rains down on them of the victim and stuff, and like there were like little setups to each one. And I remember thinking, like, that's what kind of bugged me about it. It was because, like, I don't need Dexter to be anything other than Dexter. And this feels like a Saw ripoff right now. And I feel like that's what kind of bugged me. And just the fact that those first 4 seasons were so concise with theme, and really feels like the last 4 were kind of like first 2 episodes, here's our theme. Next 8 episodes, here's some things that happen because we need stuff to happen because we ordered 12 of these. And then the last 2 were like, okay, we're going to get back to that theme. For that one, it was religion, right? And so like, it was like, how does Dexter confront radical Christianity? And like, it comes together at the end in that last scene with them in the church. Works really well. He's got a really nice speech. And then we have that, oh God moment. But that season overall to me feels lacking, but it does lead to what I consider to be somehow simultaneously like almost the worst and best of the last 4 seasons, which is 7, because so much random bullcrap happens in that season. There's an entire subplot about Quinn saving a stripper. And you could not pay me to care less about Quinn saving a stripper in that series. It's just so bad. But we also have at the end, the last 5 episodes maybe is look where to finally catching on to Dexter as the Bay Harbor Butcher. And it's the first time since those first 4 seasons that I really felt like, oh my God, is this going to happen? Right. The first time since Arthur Mitchell walked into that police station and said Dexter Morgan was the first time I was finally afraid for the character.
Yeah, that's also the season where Deb finally knows.
Yes.
She sees at the end of season 6. So
yeah,
you definitely that's the season where it did feel like things started to get back on track in a way in terms of, again, our whole overarching kind of narrative. But I don't think Dexter has nearly as much. It's kind of like his arc is, how can I get Deb on board?
Yes, pretty much. They eat ice cream a lot that season. It's weird.
I mean, that alone that's all I need.
It's true.
That's my wife. That's all I need.
Sure.
But yeah, so that one I remember lots more of, characters kind of making weird decisions.
Yeah.
And that's I feel like that's when shows do tend to go awry, is when characters making decisions that are very, we've clearly established after all this time who this character is, what their motivation is, how they would react to certain situations, and then you have more of this kind of stuff. So yeah, there's not a lot that I remember about that season either.
The Quinn and the stripper are like burned into my brain. I don't know why. I can't forget that. And he looks so terrible in that season too. Quinn, he's like, he starts as like a bro cop, and then they turn him into this like Gucci wearing dude, and it's very, very odd. And that whole season's great or terrible, but that season ends on a bang, literally, because it ends with Deb killing La Guerta, which means she is now an accomplice with Dexter to the fullest. And it was so exciting to see that. I was so excited to see what their dynamic was going to be during the next season. And instead, what I got was 7 new characters I didn't give a shit about in the last season, and a new really weird doctor that now, like, they wait, like, okay, I am not a Hollywood screenwriter by any stretch. I do love the art of narrative and have written my own things here or there. I'm going to give you guys one lesson. If you are writing an 8-season show and season 7's over and you got to start wrapping things up, episode 1 of season 8, you don't go back to the beginning in the show and be like, hi, I was a doctor that told Dexter's dad to make him make you. Turns out I'm behind this whole thing. Everything we've given a crap about for the last 7 seasons has been a facade. I automatically did not give a crap about that season when they said that. It was such a it felt wrong. Felt wrong. Yeah. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, with that, also, I think what does need to be mentioned is, wasn't the production on that like super sped up? Like it ended up dropping in about half the time.
Yeah, it sounds right.
So I felt like that whole season was kind of just like, all right, we got to figure, the opposite of like what we saw with Game of Thrones, where they purposefully took a lot of time, still didn't stick the landing.
Right.
This one just like, okay, we need to end it, go.
Yeah.
So it's just like, all right, we get, they didn't have the time to be like, that's not a great idea. It was kind of
Right.
like, well, we got to keep pushing forward.
Right.
But yeah, definitely that's something whenever I see a film or a series where you keep introducing characters at the last moment, it's like this is just complicating matters further. And something where I feel like that show definitely suffered from like having to fulfill a certain number of episodes.
Right.
Luckily, a lot of TV has been getting away from now.
Sure.
So you have less, Quinn and stripper kind of subplot.
Well, like this is like one of our favorite shows of all time, and we watched it live, and we were like about it the entire time. The last season was supposed to be the culmination of everything so far. Did you even remember that little dumbass who they were like training to be the new Dexter? When I saw that on the recap, I was like, I have no memory of this, absolutely none, because I gave this amount of crap about it. They introduced so many new things when you should be wrapping things up, and let's be like, the show should have ended with the hunt for Dexter. Like, people should have found out. And again, that lack of urgency in that last season, it never once during that season was I afraid he was going to get caught. And that's like that's how it should have ended. And we wanted to see what he would do backed into a corner, right? And so instead, but we get the lumberjack ending. So we're going to talk about that before we get into New Blood, because we do still have to talk about New Blood. I remember watching it with you. At this point, we were watching it live. What was your initial response to said lumberjack ending?
It was probably, I love endings that are ambiguous and open-ended in general. I don't need things to be spelled out for me so explicitly in black and white.
Right.
So it wasn't the kind of ending that infuriated me the way that it seems like a lot of the rest of the fan base was. But it definitely felt a bit lacking. And I felt like I was trying to be on board as best I could. I know, the days following, we were just, consuming as much as we could and eating as much as we could in terms of the thought process and everything. And it's like, yeah, we get it. This is like the one thing that he hasn't tried in a lot of ways, in terms of getting off the hook. But it definitely, when you have a show that is, been such a big part of your life and such a crazy arc and everything, to kind of end it in a, with a whisper sort of thing, it doesn't necessarily feel fitting for the whole show and for the character.
Yeah. So I remember defending it when it came out. Like, you guys know what you're talking about. It's pretty bad, like, looking back on it. The reason being is the following. I really I like the idea of Dexter forcing himself into this self-isolation as a way to protect Harrison and the rest of his friends and family, while also kind of serving as punishment for himself for what happened to Deb. Right. So I actually like that version of an ending. The problem was, number one, we just drop Harrison off with a full-blown also serial killer that you're aware. They're going to Argentina now just to hang out for the rest of their lives. I hope we trust that woman who you've known and have known to kill people for, most of her life to take care of your son. But the other part of it is, it goes back to that lack of urgency and that no one knows who Dexter is or what he'd done. And so it seems to me, though he may think that he's playing out the repercussions of his actions, he's not. And that was the real beautiful part of that show. I think that's how everybody wanted that show to end, was Dexter being caught or found out, because that's such an important part of it. Right. It's what was the driving force of most seasons, at least seasons 1 through 4, is Dexter going to get found out? And if he gets found out, what's he going to do? And so I would have enjoyed that ending, I think, a little more, as I think would everyone else have, if he was found out and had to receive larger repercussions for his actions, but it just didn't happen. Right. It's like, oh, he dies in a boating accident and everybody just thinks he's Miami Metro's blood spatter analyst. Right. And that's not who we know Dexter to be. Right. We want the characters to know what we know. We want them to be in on it. right? And I think that's really what bothers people. I think the lumberjack ending can work if it's not if it's a result of him being found out and this is how he's chosen to hide. You know what I mean? And so it fulfills those purposes. It fulfills that, oh my God, Dexter's been found out. It fulfills that self-isolation as a punishment for what he's done to everybody. And it also protects Harrison. And so but it's done in such a way that I feel like betrays the true, spirit of the show. And that it feels weird to watch Dexter get away scot-free with things,
Yeah, I think, a lot of the most compelling fiction comes from when every aspect of the character is being challenged.
Yeah.
As things wind down. And obviously, the death of Deb being the big thing, but it's like the walls were not coming in on him,
right,
so to speak.
Yes.
He wasn't
which were the best parts of the show.
Yeah, exactly. And even with how Deb went out, it felt very, very thrown together for a character that, again, is so important. Yeah. I feel, where you have such a huge send-off with a character like Rita versus, Deb are, in a lot of ways, our secondary protagonist throughout the entire show. And she, I think it's almost like they could have gone farther with when, the doctor's son, shoots her like that, as opposed to like, hey, she's doing kind of okay. And then, oh, she took a turn for the worse. Like, you have this weird, roller coaster kind of arc that just kind of falls flat and loses some of the impact that it could have had. So
and he literally gets away with murder too. Let's not forget this. One of the very last things that he does is he kills the brain surgeon with a pen on camera in a police station. The writers have the audacity to let him get away with murder. Like, it's like they're laughing at us. They're like, yeah, he got away with murder, but it's not even the murders that like you want him to get away with. I don't know. I don't know. It's frustrating, but we spent a lot of time on this. We got a little carried away because we're very excited. This is one of our favorite shows. So we sat on that ending for 10 years. We're 8 years. We're pretty bummed about most of it. We're begging for news from Showtime. And then finally we get it. Dexter's coming back for a limited series. What was your reaction when you found that out? Because I lost my damn mind.
Yeah, I remember being very excited. It's the kind of thing that I didn't expect. I didn't feel like I needed it, in terms of just, I had moved on. I had made my peace with the character and everything.
Right.
But, the news of Clyde Phillips being involved and stuff, it got me excited again, and it got me in the mood to be a fan again. And also, I should mention that in the interim, between those, is I did read a couple of the books.
Oh yeah, I read them all.
That last season, I was like, I still want this character in my life.
Yes.
So yeah, I read the first 2 books, and I'm just such an undisciplined reader that I haven't gotten to.
You still need to finish The Dark Tower, first of all, but that's fine.
Pokemon, you know better than I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
5? So yeah, when they had dropped the news, it was like, okay, all right, I think there was a little bit of let's wait and see for me, because there had been rumors for so long.
Sure.
But when it finally did come out, I was just like, okay, let's go. Let's see.
I needed it. I literally needed it. It's something that's never left my brain. He was such an important character for me, and I think most of the fan base agreed that we wanted a better send off. And so, I Showtime obviously knew that. We know that Michael C. Hall was not a fan of the original ending, so he wanted to come back, and he's an executive producer on New Blood. And so I remember seeing the first trailer for New Blood, and it just felt like everything that I wanted. It was Dexter in a strange environment, hiding out, and then something comes back from his past to confront it, and hopefully, bring that sense of urgency and that responsibility kind of back into the forefront. So Dexter New Blood season 1, episode 1 finally releases. I'm losing my literal mind over here watching it. What was your initial reaction to that first episode, and how did it feel finally getting to see our boy Jim Lindsay again?
Well, it felt different. The cinematography was different. Yeah. It looked different. It felt different. It didn't feel so dissimilar.
Right.
Still felt like Dexter, especially by the end. When we, finally bid Matt Caldwell adieu.
Yeah.
And that's where we have the first voiceover, right?
Yeah. So what's really great about that episode is, one of the hallmarks of Dexter is the voiceover, right? It's his dark passenger talking to him, right? And we start New Blood, and Dexter hasn't killed for 10 years. He's in hiding in Iron Lake. And, which I thought was cool. There was some speculation that at the lumberjack ending, that final look he has at the camera. I remember at the time people were talking about, like, does this mean there's no code anymore? Does this mean he's loose? Like, he's got nothing to not kill for. And so he's just going to be killing whoever he wants. So I like that they gave a definitive answer to that first, and that he's been sober, kill sober for 10 years. And so we have a new loop, right? Like we talked about how season 1, episode 1, we're in Dexter's loop, right? We're in the donuts, the work, the date night. We're introduced to a new loop pretty quickly, which is, Fred's, and he even he says to himself, make sure you keep your routine, right? Like the checking the fish traps and feeding Vincent Van Gogh, which is the greatest name for a goat in the world. And we asked that question again. Why does the story start here? And it's because this is the day that Dexter gets challenged again, and everything's about to change for a second time. And when he finally can't control himself anymore, when Matt Caldwell kills that white deer, that literal, heavy-handed representation of Dexter's own light that he wants to keep, when it's killed in front of him, that dark passenger comes back, and it comes back in the voiceover, which we do not hear for the entire episode. And when that happened, I had chills down my spine.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And great foreshadowing.
Yes.
Too, in that moment that I, didn't pick up on until watching the last episode. But I got a question for you that I had written down here. So
okay.
I believe in the hierarchy, or in the chronology of the episode, we meet Harrison before Dexter kills again, right?
Yes.
Do you think without Harrison coming back that Dexter would have killed him? Would have killed Matt? Because I think that Harrison is kind of what unlocks that.
That's a really good question. I kind of agree. I think we return back to this. Like I said, this one really has season 1 feels to it, which I think is intentional, because we have this kind of driving relationship between Brian Moser, his brother, and Dexter in the very first season, and it's what sparks these feelings that he hasn't had in forever, right? And so I think you're kind of on there. I think that seeing Harrison awoke something inside of him that he has been suppressing for a really long time, and they end pretty similarly, actually. And we'll get to the new ending as well, because it's also been quite divisive. But I think that's a great point, and I absolutely, I think so. I'm not sure if he does it if he hadn't met Harrison. Harrison was such a representation of a different him, right? And so this literal representation of his past comes along. Although let's not ignore the fact that Matt Caldwell is an absolute dick. Like, oh, yeah. I totally wanted to kill him as well. But I think you're dead on there, and I think it's a great representation of this life that's coming back to get him. And Clyde Phillips has been saying this for months, that this story is inevitable. The way this story unfolds is inevitable, and that's what I think Harrison is to the story. He's inevitable, and he was going to come back. And so, and that's the spark of this really interesting relationship that we've always wanted to see, because they're the core of this show now, right? And it's everything I wanted as a Dexter fan, coming back and seeing what has become of these two characters.
Oh yeah, agreed, 100%. It's so interesting watching the show where you have our boy, as you so
Our boy.
nicely said. Um, but we've introduced this very new dynamic. You know, the
Yes.
last time we've seen him as a dad is when Harrison was a baby, and
Yeah.
pretty good as a dad for the most part. But obviously, adolescents and teenagers, it's just a whole different
Right.
story.
And he loved being a dad too. It was one of the very few times you could like root for Dexter for something that actually deserved to be rooted for. Like he wanted to be a good dad to Harrison.
Absolutely. So it's really cool, and it's a very stark moment where you have his past now
Yeah.
literally staring in his face, and now he has to reflect on everything that he's done and everything that's happened, and
Yeah.
whereas running away, you kind of don't have to worry about that. So again, it's this idea of forcing our characters into uncomfortable and challenging situations,
Yeah.
and that's kind of at this stage, that's literally the most uncomfortable and challenging thing that could happen to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think Harrison, or do you actually, sorry, let me rephrase that. Do you think Hannah McKay did in fact die of cancer? Because that's a question that's been burning around. Some people believe, I'm not going to say I myself is included, but that she was a victim of Harrison's dark passenger.
Yeah, I think that could very well be the case. And again, that's where I love the ambiguity of
Yeah.
that. It's the kind of thing when he dropped it, it is kind of like, oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the kind of thing where, Dex isn't going to be able to really, or certainly, I don't think Dex would be one to really dive into that
Sure.
and investigate it for himself. I think he definitely takes it at face value, but it definitely adds some cool questions that it almost would have been fun to know.
Yeah.
But I like it more being very left up in the air.
There was a point where I thought this season was going to culminate with Dexter being on Harrison's table, and that we would find out that Harrison killed Hannah, like actually physically do it, and he had come back for Dexter because of his resentment. Though it didn't turn out being that dark, which I think it's better that way too, because they do such a great job of differentiating between Dexter and Harrison, especially in that final conversation that they have, where Dexter wants to feed his dark passenger and Harrison wants it to go away, right? And so that's a fundamental difference between the two. And if Dexter had just tried a little bit in therapy, maybe we wouldn't have gotten here at this point.
Maybe
that's all I'm saying.
That's where it started.
Yeah,
that's the real. Those were the friends made along the way.
Exactly.
Therapist.
So a Dexter season, in my opinion, is only really as good as its antagonist. So who's Dexter going toe to toe with? How did you feel as Kurt as a villain compared to some of the original greats like Trinity?
It's tough to rank him. First off, it's just it's Clancy Brown. Is that
it's Mr. Krabs, Clancy Brown? Yes.
Like that rules.
Yes.
That's so awesome. And it was fun that I was able to make that connection, but that connection didn't overshadow things. He still did such a good job in the role that I wasn't just thinking, oh, that's Mr. Krabs killing people.
I was bummed that at no point during this season was he sitting in the office at the truck stop going, money, 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 money.
That and I remember him being in a couple Star Wars things too recently. Like he's the Savage Press, and he was in that one episode of The Mandalorian. I'm like, make that money, Clancy.
Oh yeah, he's in Shawshank Redemption, man. He's I'm
like, go you, man.
Yeah, he's great. He's great, and he was perfect for this, I think.
Yeah. But I thought that he was a great character again in terms of similar to Trinity, somebody that's an unusual reflection.
Yes.
Dexter.
Yes.
Where again you have somebody where you have a person that's a father with a son that's all fucked up, and that's something that he's like cannot trying to avoid that with his son, and
right.
Those are the characters that I think end up creating the most complicated scenarios and stuff, and I think that's always exciting. But in the dread and like what an awful person.
Yeah.
I the red herring thrown up early on with the like billionaire guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I would
Who
have,
does not come back at all.
yeah, I would have liked to have seen some at
Yeah.
least, some kind of resolution there, but definitely in terms of like when Audrey interacts with him, just like, oh shit, is he
Yeah.
gonna, with what we've seen from some of these other young women. So he definitely, I think, portrayed a very multifaceted kind of character that you could see where people would like him, and very similar to Dex in a way.
Yeah.
He's a charismatic kind of guy.
Yep.
Coming in and trying to portray somebody normal
Yeah.
who is very, very messed up. And so even that kind of, two sides of the same coin, where you have somebody who has taken all those negative emotions and feelings and stuff and just, is reliving something really messed up that he did versus just Dark Passenger that is, supposedly a more productive
Sure.
approach to that. So I thought that he was a really good character. I think he, to me, I think probably ranks up towards the top. I still think Trinity kind of takes the top position.
Oh yeah, no, let's not be crazy. No one was going to take John Lithgow's post Footloose endeavors away from him. Just like no one will take Mr. Krabs's post SpongeBob endeavors away from him. But I agree. I think you're spot on there with the mirrors that we have, right? And we kind of see. I think what's cool about it is we see how Kurt responds to losing his son, and towards the end of the end of the show, we see how Dexter will respond to losing Harrison for a second time, right? And he kind of makes the ultimate sacrifice. And I feel like the entire season we have these different mirrors, and especially with Harrison, he sees Kurt initially as like, oh, this is the father that I always wanted, that I could have a connection to, not knowing that that maybe Dexter did bring it a little too over the top with the connection that they had, but that they were right. They had similar urges that essentially in the end brings them closer. So I think that mirror idea is really, really great. And one of the highlights of the season for me was, we see Kurt and we see his process, and we see him trapping these women in this hotel room, right? And having them essentially starve to death until he lets them go and shoots them. And, then we have these like close-ups of him doing work on the bodies, and we never know what he's doing with them. And then that second to last episode, they finally go down into his bunker and you see his work. And that's probably like a, oh my God moment to me that I hadn't had in a long time in Dexter, especially when they got to the end of that hallway and you saw the Mary fucking Kill girl. And it's just like, yeah, Molly. And it's just like, oh my God, that was a highlight. And I was so stoked that they're still finding ways to really throw me through the loop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And presented in a way that's so, visually stunning and interesting in terms of what you're seeing. It's always that kind of juxtaposition that I love when you have something that's just so horrific, but displayed in such an aesthetically beautiful kind of way.
Yes.
Like that's part of why I love the Hannibal show.
Oh yeah.
Never watched that, but that show is excellent. And that was like the most beautiful show I've ever seen in terms of how they shot it. Very, very modern, and the way that they kind of portrayed some of these, heinous acts and stuff, but in a way that's stunningly beautiful.
Right.
I got callbacks to that in a way, but I loved that they didn't show Kurt killing Molly, because I think it adds weight and impact to that moment. Obviously it's a heavy moment in general, and then again you have a character that's been around for the whole season,
right?
Bam, that kind of final shot, that final nail in the coffin that really pushed over the cliff. It just makes it hit so much harder.
Yeah. So Cap, I don't know if you know this, but the internet is not a very nice place. The internet right now is currently pissed at Angela for figuring out who Dexter is. So I would like to pose to you, rational human, how do you feel about Angela finally being the one to do it? Though technically she's not actually, but LaGuerta keeps that crown, but we do get to see that kind of pay off. How do you feel about her being the one to do it?
I think that's how it has to be.
Yeah.
In terms of it, again, a character that is close, but it's refreshing now to have a love interest that, you had Rita, who was completely oblivious to everything, thinking that he was on drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
Then you have all of the other love interests being ones that he opened up to, that kind of more or less accepted him for those tendencies that, in Lila and Lumen and Hannah. So to have somebody, again, this is where we have that great kind of conflict of interest, where you have someone whose job it is to literally track down.
Yes.
So I think it makes a whole lot of sense, and I feel like Dexter is always at its best when it's bringing things close to home.
Yeah.
In terms of his immediate surroundings and everything, and that's where I think some of those seasons that didn't succeed as well, I think that's kind of
agreed.
So it has to be somebody that's that close and that has that kind of scope and everything. And also, what a Dexter thing to immediately, or not necessarily immediately, but to be shacking up with like the Chief of Police.
Yeah.
What a dick move.
Well, to me, I agree with you. I think it's perfect, and I think in some ways it's another mirror for Rita. And obviously, they're both strong, independent women characters with their own agency. But I kind of always felt like that Angela was kind of a mirror for Rita, because a single mother who is now in a relationship with a serial killer. But it's almost to me like a redemption kind of like for Rita, like the fact that Dexter's partner, Dexter's girlfriend, is able to do this and beat him at his own game, which, by the way, no one has been able to do. It makes me feel better for Rita, because it feels like she's winning one for the strong women, for the ones who haven't been able to escape the path of Dexter's sins. She overcame. And it feels perfect to me. It does. And it was very clear throughout the whole show that she was a good cop. She was not Deb, who I don't know if we've mentioned is a horrible police officer, but she was a great cop who followed instincts. And I felt that the way she figured it out too wasn't too much of a stretch. Like we want to believe that the person who finally gets Dexter really gets him. And I think part of what sells that is the one conversation where they're having, he's chained to the chair, and she starts showing him the pictures of the wheel marks, and we hear that voiceover before she says it, when she goes, a wheel mark. And when he says that, we know that he knows he's had, right? And especially when she brings up Angel's voice, he knows, right? And I had like heart palpitations the whole last time when we were watching it. I was like, oh my God, like what is going to happen? And then they keep dropping this evidence, and it's a scene that you've always wanted, right? Like you want Dexter in that seat, and you want him to be found out, because you want to know what he's going to do when he gets found out. So to me, it was perfect. Thematically, how it happened, the fact that we're able to bring Angel back into the forefront as well, and get him in on this, and we really get that closure for LaGuerta as well. I thought it was perfect. Thought it was great.
Yeah, definitely. And it's again the past coming back to haunt him, and it's you can't really escape that kind of stuff. It's really just a matter of time. So first you have Harrison, and then all of these other things, and he starts to fall into old habits. Yeah, and he was doing so fine without it.
Right.
He had his not necessarily redemption. Yeah, but he had what he had been looking for a long time. Yeah. And although he was still his kind of emotionally stunted self, he was blending in, and everything was okay.
Yeah, for sure.
and then Harrison coming up and really throwing the wrench in plans, from the get-go for everybody.
Yep.
Is just, I think that's the first domino getting knocked over in the long time then of everything happening. So yeah, it like I said, it's the kind of thing it felt like it had to happen.
Yeah.
And in terms of putting your characters in the most challenging position they can be in.
Yep.
Not only has he been found out, but it's somebody who trusted him and cared for him and was betrayed by him. And then we can see how he responds to being, backed into a corner.
So we kind of talked about, the person closest to him being the one who finds out, the person who loves him, right? And this is a question I meant to ask you, but it slipped my mind. So we're gonna kind of go back around to this one before we finish up with the finale and the ending. We're gonna dive in. Do you? This is also this. So this is a thing on the internet as well. It's been a topic of discussion for, I don't know, like 10 years. Do you think Trinity told Rita about Dexter before he killed her? Did Rita know?
I feel like I would need to rewatch the season and how he did things. But
it's a scary question for Rita. I feel so scared for Rita right now.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing part of me just wants to be like, no, he didn't, just to save all of us.
Right.
Because it was so much more cruel. But yeah, I can't remember how and that's also, it's part of not the trilogy, right? She was kind of the outlier in terms of...
she was an outlier. Theoretically, I think at the time I thought theoretically this could be the start of a new cycle, but that's not how it worked with him, right? But there's another theory that this got debunked by the new season, because we now know that her being killed by Trinity's canon, because we see Harrison seeing it. There's a theory that she killed herself, and that Trinity didn't do it at all. That the weight of their relationship and how it was failing so terribly up until that point, like, got to her. I never personally liked that theory, but it was out there for a while, and people had convinced themselves that Trinity actually didn't have anything to do with it, which kind of cheapens the whole death in the first place, because the whole point is that it's Dexter's fault, right?
Yeah.
So, for sure. But
I think it's better taken at face value. Sometimes I feel like keep it simple, stupid. The simplest explanation, I think, is usually the best one.
Right.
And
this is the internet, Cap. Okay. We got it. We got to talk about every point, everything. We're all wrong, and everyone else is wrong. So let's just be wrong.
Let's be wrong together.
All right. So I personally cannot think of another show in the history of television that gets a second chance at an ending. We all want Game of Thrones to have a second chance at an ending, but Dexter was the first one to actually get one. So, 8 years ago, Dexter ends. Universal misery over the ending of the show. So they get a second chance. And, before the finale started, we were all like, oh my God, is there going to be a season 2? Is it like, what's going to happen? It has to be. It's so popular right now. Well, we don't know if there's going to be a season 2. However, this came to a definitive end for the character. And just like the first time, the internet is on fire right now because of this ending. So, a little bit of a recap. Dexter escapes from jail by killing Coach Logan, calls Harrison from his phone, from the coach's phone, tells him to meet him where they killed the deer. Angela is off somewhere else, distracted by Dexter, looking at all the evidence from the Kurt Caldwell murders. They meet up where they killed the white deer. Harrison puts together that Dexter was the one who killed Coach to get away. And he, in turn, shoots Dexter, and Dexter dies at the hands of his own son as a means for both of them to escape the situation they're in. Dexter escaping that first rule, don't get caught. And number 2, being able to finally give something to his son, which is a release from his own dark passenger that Dexter had caused. People are not happy. Some people are happy. Let's talk about it. Cap, what were your reactions?
I I didn't immediately love it because I feel like main character dying is kind of one of the obvious things. But in terms of how it was presented, I as soon as they showed him walking in the snow,
Yeah.
okay, this is what's happening.
Yep.
And I thought it was a really nice callback to how it started. It's the kind of thing that it made the most sense to me.
Yep.
And although it's a cliche sort of way to end things, I certainly couldn't think of anything better than that.
To me, it's perfect. It's a perfect ending, and I loved it, and I'm unapologetic about it. And here's why I think it's a perfect ending. If we go back to the original ending, something that we all think we really, really didn't like about it was this this lack of accountability, the fact that no one found out what Dexter was, and just kind of a lack of accountability for his actions, especially sending his own son away with a stranger he barely knows. And they try to use character development to say she's not a stranger. She was a stranger, and now she's expected, a never time mother is now expected to raise a child. Like, I don't know, it's weird. So, but here's why I think it's so perfect. Number one, Dexter is found out. After this, there is no going back. Like LaGuerta Batista has LaGuerta's entire file. They're going to push that. There's going to be huge media coverage. Dexter is now the Bay Harbor Butcher, and Dokes is an innocent man. And to me, that holds a ton of weight. I don't need to see it on a TV screen in a shot of Harrison at a bar watching that happen, because I know it's going to happen, because Batista is on his way there, and he's going to do anything to make sure LaGuerta rests in peace, essentially. And so I have that knowledge. That Dexter is found out, and that his story is now going to be real for everybody that's ever known him. Number two, so I see a lot of things online about how, oh my God, it was so uncharacteristic of Dexter to do this. It was so out of character for him to do that. It was not uncharacteristic of him to kill Coach to get out of there. He's killed innocent people multiple times before, because it fits rule number one of the code. Rule number one of the code, before anything else, is don't get caught. The fact that anybody thinks that this series could end with him being caught and like on, in jail, giving interviews in a lethal injection table, that was never going to happen, because rule number one is don't get caught. The fact that, and some people say that it's out of character for Harrison to shoot his dad. He had already participated in a murder and was going to kill somebody else. And to me, it comes back to this whole like theme that we need to kill the dark passenger, right? And Dexter finally finds a situation where he's able to give himself completely to an emotion, to that love that he has, that he wants to have for his son, that he finishes off his narration by saying, "I've never truly felt love, not really, until right now." And he's giving his life to Harrison as a token of that love, for Harrison himself to dispel his own dark passenger, which was given to him by his father, and that's why he says, that this is the only way out for both of us, because Dexter was never going to get caught, and Harrison was never going to get rid of his dark passenger, because they weren't the same type of passenger that Dexter so desperately wanted it to be. It wasn't the same. His dark passenger was given to him by his dad for abandoning him. This whole time we think it's about Rita in the tub, but it's really about Dexter leaving him over and over and over again. And he's faced with Dexter leaving him again. And so in this really, really beautiful moment, we have another mirror of the first episode, right? We have Dexter finally accepting his light and being held accountable for his actions. And we have, the character of the son, the opposite of Matt Caldwell, but still the son, killing the white deer that is Dexter in this episode. It is a perfect ending. I'll fight you on it. Let's go, internet. Bring it on. I loved it. And I'm not sorry.
Yeah, I've been trying to avoid, because like I hate just internet shits on insert thing here of the week. I don't care. I feel like, and this is a very oxymoronic thing to say, but I feel like, not every, the internet gave everybody an opinion, and I don't think everybody's opinion needs to be heard.
Right.
So says I, giving his opinion on a podcast with his friend.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to Nightmare Network.
Yeah, I was looking at like the Reddit thread, and somebody was saying like they could have done 2 seasons of Dexter, in jail and stuff. I'm like, that's not. No,
I don't want to watch that at all.
Yeah, and I kind of don't want to see a sequel. I think that it was, it kind of ended with just about all the bows and Knightley, wrapped and everything. It was about as, to me, as complete and put a stamp on it's done,
right?
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, a series of Harrison now taking over. It's like, does the world need that?
No, we don't. There is speculation that there will be a Harrison spinoff, but I don't. To be honest, I would like it, but I don't want it to be Dexter. You know what I mean? Like I would like it if it wasn't Dexter. Like I don't want him going out and killing people, right? Because that's what Dexter fought to stop, right? Mm-hmm. I'd certainly like to see a different approach. Like what if this was about Harrison moving west and starting a new life, right? And like struggling to open up to people and not turning to violent urges, but just struggling to overcome the things he's had to be through or go through, right? And not not make it about murder. I'd watch that show. Hell yeah, I'd watch that show. It probably wouldn't have the humor that Dexter tends to have, but like I would definitely watch it. He was great too. Jack Alcott was a really good Harrison, and I thought their relationship was really, really, really great.
Yeah, and that was obviously the most important part of it.
Yeah.
Every season having that one word theme.
Yep.
Fatherhood. But again, it worked so well in terms of having it worked well, and it felt fair having Dexter and Harrison as our protagonists.
Yes.
Yes. I think the season was just as much about Harrison as it was about Dexter, and again, that seems like kind of how it should be.
Yes.
And felt poetic in a way. So I don't know if Harrison is a character alone without, a lot of folks have said like, oh, something where now Harrison has to deal with Dexter in the same way that Dexter had the flashes with Deb and stuff.
Yeah. That doesn't make sense to me either.
Yeah. I'm like, it doesn't carry the same weight and stuff as this did. So, I don't know why people are so mad about it. I'm not going to bother looking into why people are so mad about it. Ultimately, I really don't care about their opinion anyway. So.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw a lot of positive reviews from fans on Twitter and a lot of negative reviews from media outlets, and it's just interesting. Sometimes there's a disconnect with what we want. I think it's a perfect ending. I really do, and I'll watch it a 9th time probably after this. So. Great. All right, so we have overstayed our welcome, my good friend. We had a blast talking about Dexter with you guys today. We absolutely nerded out on this, which is what Nightmare Network is all about. I want to thank Christopher Capitanio from zooming in with me all the way down from Atlanta, Georgia. Everybody congratulate him on his recent wedding, which is awesome. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to our first episode of RIP Reboots. You can expect a few more of these throughout the season, including things like Wrong Turn and other things of the sort. So thank you guys so much. I'm Mike, and don't forget to share your scares. Thanks for tuning in to Season 2 of Nightmare Network. Remember to like and subscribe and follow us on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for updates regarding all things terrifying. Is there a movie or TV series you want us to talk about on our podcast? DM us and let us know. Remember, here at Nightmare Network, you share your scares.